What's up, Yinzers, Yinzets? Welcome back to yet another edition of Pucks and Net. We will give you the latest downtime breakdowns, everything from this past week in Penguins hockey. I am joined by my co-host Hunter McGroarty. Oh my
Hunter
goodness, I'm
McGroarty.
getting ahead of myself. Hunter Hodies. Rutger McGroarty will be a story for later, but Hunter Hodies is with me today. And on that note, I mean, if you want to take it just right into the news of the day, you can.
I guess I'm Rutger McGroarty's older brother at this point, just based on your little intro there. But
Yeah.
yeah, Rutger McGroarty called up from Wilkes-Barre, well deserved after 5 games. Kelsey, I thought they were going to give him 5 to 7-ish more games, maybe a little bit more. And I think in a perfect world they probably would. But I think the decision makers, the coaching staff, and the management were kind of just like, all right, there's way too many passengers in the lineup. We need to get a spark going for our forward group. We have some guys who are getting closer to returning, and we're going to touch on that a little later. But I think they were like, all right, we need a spark, and let's call it Rutger McGroarty. 4 goals, 7 points in 5 games. He is making it look all too easy. His skating looks even better than it did at the end of last year, which is saying something. And his release on these goals, these aren't just garbage goals that he has scored, Kelsey. He is blowing the puck past these AHL goaltenders and making it look way too easy. I know it's only been 5 games, but he's still looking very much like he is NHL ready. He was NHL ready at the end of last season. And with that, we're going to see him on the third line with the quote-unquote kids line with Ben Kindle and Ville Koivunen. It's kind of similar to what the Rangers did a few seasons ago when they had their kids line, Kelsey, with Lafreniere, Kakko, and Filipino. Obviously, 2 of those kids are no longer there. I know Rangers fans were very high on all 3 kids, but here in the Penguins, I think optimism is a lot higher for this type of line, especially with McGroarty, who you saw what he can do at the end of last season. You've seen what Kindle has been able to do this season. Koivunen feels like it's getting close for him to score his first NHL goal, but until it happens, we're just going to keep making jokes and making memes about it. But I do like the potential of that third line a lot. And then Bokwe Mama is also up from Wilkes-Barre, and considering what happened that last game in Philadelphia, I understand why they called him up. He brings that snarl. He brings that physicality. A lot of players in the locker room love him to death. And you saw what happened in that last matchup against the Flyers last year, Kelsey. Remember, he had that big hit that drew, some fiery comments from former head coach Don Torella of the Philadelphia Flyers, excuse me. So you know that he's going to be involved in some capacity tonight, whether it's a big hit, a fight, maybe he scores a goal. Speaking of that, he had a beautiful penalty shot goal this past week for Wilkes-Barre, and he's been playing fairly well down there. So I think he deserves to be in this lineup over someone like Joona Koppanen, who is not really doing much of anything when he plays. And it looks like Imama is going to be on the 4th line with Dewar and Lazat. Talked about the kids line, Novak with Malkin and Mantha, and then Kevin Hayes still up there with Sidney Crosby and Brian Rust. But that won't be the case that will be the case until Rickard Rakell comes back, but it's probably going to be later this month. So a few more weeks until the top line is fully back together, but super excited about these 2 moves after they sent Tristan Brose and Danton Heinen back down. I've been blabbering for the last few minutes. I'm going to give this over to Kelsey, but overall, super excited. Both well-deserved call-ups, especially for McGroarty. He's been lighting it up, and I'll say for Imama, that penalty shot goal was a thing of beauty this past week.
Yeah, I think these are well-deserved call-ups for both of these guys. Mama's one of those energy guys that you really could use on a 4th line, especially when you're playing the Philadelphia Flyers. You mentioned the Trevor Zegras the Trevor Zegras play against Noel Chari. We'll see if there's any kind of retribution tonight from Imama, but sometimes you need players like that in your lineup when things aren't going well. I mean, sometimes it seems a little counterintuitive when your team's not scoring, when you're lacking scoring depth, when you need more offensive players in your lineup, to bring in a guy like Imama, who really isn't known for his offense, but more so for that energy role, more so for stirring things up. But honestly, sometimes that works. And whatever the Penguins did in the month of November wasn't working with their lineup for the most part. They still, managed to scratch and claw their way to some points. some OT lost points. We know they finally got their first overtime win last week, which was a little bit of an exciting bit. But, you need guys like this in your lineup from time to time. They don't need to play every night. They don't need to be in there on a consistent basis. But there are just some times when your guys need a spark. Your guys need that guy who's going to go in with a ton of energy, with that kind of mindset to really be a momentum shifter for your team. So that's something that Amama can provide. That's something that he's good at. And like you said, I mean, that was a pretty nasty shootout goal too. I mean, there was nothing cheap about that one. I'm not going to sit here and say that Amama's going to light the world on fire offensively at the NHL level. But I mean, he can provide something for the Penguins on that fourth line. And honestly, I like that the makeup of that fourth line with Amama on it. You got Dewar, you got Lizotte, who are both relentless forecheckers, and also energy guys. But then you kind of add that physical element with Amama too. So I'm curious to kind of see how those three guys mesh together on that line. And then in terms of McGroarty, I mean, you said it. I think there was a different plan in place. If I had to guess, I don't know that. I'm not privy to that information. But it does kind of seem like they had a return to play plan in place for McGroarty that was probably preconceived, was probably supposed to be a little bit longer than 5 games. But he goes down there, he scores a goal in 4 consecutive games to, start his return to play stint in the AHL. As you said, none of them were cheapies. He has 7 points in those 5 games that he was down there. Didn't look a step behind. And, when the Penguins are ailing as much as they are with their injury situation, when they need scoring depth, when they just need a guy who's capable of putting the puck in the back of the net, sometimes need outweighs what the original plan was. And sometimes performance outweighs what that original plan was. So whatever the original plan was for Rutger McGroarty, I'm glad to see that they said, hey, you're blowing it out of the water. Let's just accelerate this. And that's a good thing to see from the Penguins who, we've seen them experiment with youth in their lineup this season. Rutger McGroarty will be the 10th rookie to play for the Penguins this season, which is a league high. And you don't necessarily always, have the Penguins and youth be congruent. But that's kind of what's happening this season. I think some of these older veterans are kind of skewing the age of this roster because there are a lot of young guys getting opportunities. And you mentioned we're going to get that kid line, Monday against Philadelphia. That'll be tonight. We'll see McGroarty, Kindle, Koivunen on the same line. I think that could be good for all 3 of them. We've seen Koivunen get so close, as you mentioned. It's coming, Ville. He's played really well the last couple of games. I really liked his game the other night. So, it's coming for Ville Koivunen. He has some familiarity with Rutger McGroarty. I think that should help. They played a lot together in Wilkes-Barre Scranton last season. And then we've seen what Kindle's capable of as a playmaking center. So I'm excited to see this kid line kind of get some runway here, at least for a couple games until they start to get a little healthier.
Right, I agree. And Kindle, he's shown the ability to carry whoever is on his line. It really hasn't mattered. And I think with the way he plays and the way that McGroarty plays, I think those two could form some instant chemistry. I really do. And Koivunen, we all know how he is as a playmaker, getting closer to that first initial goal. Maybe it happens tonight against the Flyers. Maybe not. It's eventually going to happen. 2 glorious chances against Columbus, Kelsey, both get blocked. And he literally just looks up to the heavens. And it's like, what is it going to take? But I think now that he's on a line with a couple other kids that are very hockey smart, they're really good players. I really think that this could be a great thing for him as well. And I think they're going to juggle the lines a little bit after because, Justin Brazeau, I think he is getting closer to coming back. He's been participating in morning skates, and they have 2 more games on this road trip. I wouldn't be surprised to see him back, later on this week into next week. Noel Acciari, he's been participating in morning skates. I think he's going to return as well. And I think once he does return, you might see him take Amama's spot on the 4th line just because Acciari does have some chemistry with Dewar and Lizotte. And then later on in the month, you have Ricardo Rakell. That's still probably Kelsey, 3 to 4 weeks away. He's been skating, but hasn't really been practicing, but he's still getting closer to returning. We all know he's probably going to be back on the top line. And then it gets interesting because you have a lot of tough decisions to make. Kevin Hayes either gets moved down or he gets out of the lineup completely. You can even say the same for Achari potentially, just because, Novak is on the second line right now. And we all know how great the Malkin, Mantha, Brazeau line has been when Brazeau has been healthy. So it's going to make for some pretty tough calls for this roster. Billy Koivunen is still on the third line. Does he potentially come out for a game or something like that now that McGroarty is up? And I'll say this, Kelsey, I don't think he's going back down. I think there's I'll say it's probably 95% that he stays up the rest of the season, just considering the way he played at the end of last season, the way that they got him some games at the start here. And I agree with you. I think they probably wanted him to get a few more games, but they saw the way the month of November went. They've seen that there's just too many passengers, and this is just me speaking. I'm speculating a little bit, but I think they've seen that there's too many players in the lineup that are not doing enough, and it's time to get another one of these kids and Boko and Mama, 2 kids, I should say, in the lineup to provide some more energy, more of a spark to the team, like you saw at the end of last season when they called up McGroarty and Koivunen, and that both of them provided an energy, both of them provided a spark to this team, and they were beating some pretty good playoff teams at the end of last season. They weren't close to making the playoffs, but you could see the kids really helped out and they were playing better hockey. And I think they're hoping for the same here, whether it's Kindle lineup, McGroarty, Koivunen, Boko Imama, Tristan Brose, who may get a call up later, Avery Hayes, etc. So those are my thoughts on that. But also tonight, Kelsey, such a big game. The Flyers are playing really well as of late. They've won 3 in a row, 5 of 6. Penguins get 2 clean points. They're tied for them for the final, not for the final wildcard spot, but for the first wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference. So taking 2 points here is very critical, especially with the month that they have here. A lot of tough games coming up against bona fide cup contenders, especially on this road trip, Kelsey, where they'll have Tampa and Dallas as well. You're muted.
Absolutely. This is a really big game for them for a lot of reasons. And, I said last week before their 3-game slate that they needed to get at least 4 out of 6. Obviously, that game against Toronto did not go the way the Penguins wanted. I think it kind of was almost a wake-up call for the management and just the coaching staff to make some changes to this lineup and start to address some of the deficiencies on the roster in the meantime, especially until they're waiting for those injured guys to return. But they did get 4 out of 6 points out of those games. And if they can make it, 6 out of 8 in this little stretch here against Philadelphia tonight, that's a big deal because we've mentioned it so many times on this podcast. Like December is an absolute gauntlet, both in terms of the schedule and opponents, because, none of these are easy games because right after Dallas, you have Anaheim, who's playing really good hockey this season. You have Montreal 3 times. You have the Oilers, who are struggling, but always give the Penguins fits. You have Utah, who's fallen off a little bit, but they're still playing some pretty good hockey. Ottawa, and then you got Toronto again, who the Penguins just can't seem to beat the Toronto Maple Leafs. A really bad matchup the last couple of years. They've lost 8 out of their last 11 against Toronto.
Everyone else can somehow beat the Maple Leafs this year except the Penguins. It really is kind of funny.
Yeah. And speaking of, the Blackhawks are right after Toronto at the end of the month, and the Blackhawks always give the Penguins fits as well. Yep. I know they're better this year, but, it's just the list goes on and on. They have a lot of tough opponents in the month of December. And it's good to see them starting to get healthy too. We've mentioned that Brazeau and Achari are probably pretty close. They have been skating in a non-contact capacity with the team over the last week or so. But, those guys are probably a little close. And as you said, once they come back, you kind of have penciled in a few guys that might be moved out to make way for those guys. You pencil Kopen in, you pencil Mama. There's a couple guys that you can probably move in and out there in terms of roster management. But something else to consider too, and I think the Rakell timeline is a big one because Harrison Brunick is loaned to Wilkes-Barre Scranton right now. But he still counts as a roster spot for the Penguins because he was taken off the active NHL roster. His spot still counts as one of the 23. So, I mean, as long as Brunick is being loaned to Team Canada or loaned to Wilkes-Barre Scranton, he's still going to count against, the roster. So, I mean, that'll make things interesting for the timing of when Raquel comes back, because another thing to note is that the Penguins have carried 8 defensemen all season long. And, if Raquel comes back and a lot of these guys are still playing pretty well, maybe they send Brunick back to junior, at the end of December to make way for Raquel to return. And they decide to carry 14 forwards and 7 defensemen. So it'll kind of be interesting to see how they decide to kind of maneuver things once guys start to get healthy, because I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. I really think Koivunen's picking up some steam recently. And, he's not scoring clearly, but I mean, I think there's some momentum being built there. I really like the chemistry that him and Kindle have. And then obviously, once Raquel and Brazeau come back, they're going to slot right back into their top 6 positions, I would assume. And then Achari's done well on that 4th line with Dewar and Lizotte all season long. Not really any reason to change that. So they're going to have some decisions to make once they start to get healthier. And given the schedule, the sooner the better, Hunter, because, as we said, it's a tough schedule. And when the Penguins were healthy, they were one of the best teams in the league earlier this season. So getting healthy is a big thing.
Right, and the top 6 was especially rolling. We all know how the big second line was just taking everyone's lunch money. Mantha was great. Gino, we all know how great he was and how he continues to be great. And then Justin Brazeau was a goal per game player and a point per game player. I would love it if he were to continue that, though it's going to be tough because I'm not sure he's going to keep shooting Kelsey at 30 to 35% for a full season when he comes back. But even Raquel, he was playing well before that freak accident injury where the puck goes off his hand. Sid, we all know what he's doing to start the year. Ho-hum. Brian Rust, you and I have been pretty down on him this year, but I will say this, Kelsey, I felt like he was the big catalyst for that comeback.
Oh, yeah.
He got them going in the 3rd period. He was in and out of the game twice with, little injuries here and there, but he comes back, gets the goal to get the Penguins back in it, and he plays his absolute ass off in the 3rd period. And that's one of the main reasons why he is such a beloved player, both on and off the ice. He's one of the top leaders on this team, and you saw it during that game, especially in that 3rd period against Columbus. So I know you and I have been pretty negative about him just because the process has not really matched the on-ice production, but I saw the process at least on Friday in Columbus. I will say that, and he was a big reason why they were able to come back. But I agree. I think there's going to be some pretty tough calls coming up here once they get healthy, and hopefully that comes here in December. It's getting closer for, Brazeau, Achari, Raquel, still probably a few more weeks away, but the sooner the better because they need these guys back. It's been rough since a lot of these players have gone down. So I'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see what happens here. Hopefully McGroarty makes an instant impact on that 3rd line, makes some decisions tough. Hopefully Mama makes an instant impact on that 4th line, and hopefully they bring home the 2 points against the Philadelphia Flyers. That should be a good one tonight, folks. So tune in for that. But we are going to move forward to the next segment. As we've mentioned, we're going to be spotlighting one Penguins prospect per week. And last couple of weeks, we've kind of focused on a couple younger prospects. We focused on Will Horkoff, the first, who's, by the way, just continuing his dominance at the NCAA level this season. He had 4 goals this past weekend for the University of Michigan. He is now leading the NCAA in goals and points with 18 goals in 18 games, 26 points. Just absolute ridiculousness from Will Horkoff at the NCAA level this year. And guys, he's 18. I mean, this is an 18-year-old putting up a goal per game pace at the NCAA level. That's almost unheard of. I mean, that's just you don't hear of that every single day with a guy as young as he is putting up a goal per game at the NCAA level. Just ridiculous stuff from Will Horkoff. Ryan Miller extended his point streak to 19 games in the WHL over the weekend. He's another one we've talked about. But a guy we haven't talked about yet is Mikhail Ilyin, which, he's playing over in the KHL. He's been playing there the last couple seasons. He did activate the first year of his 3-year entry-level contract this season. He signed it this summer. He is playing out that first year in the KHL. But I got to say, it seems like he just keeps getting better and better and better. And, he's putting up some numbers this season. He does have 8 goals and 24 points in 32 games. When you're looking at just raw stats, that might not stand out too much. But when we're talking about the KHL, that's not a nothing burger for a 20-year-old. And I actually did a little bit of digging, just into the scoring leaders in the KHL. There are only 2 players aged 19 or 20, Mikhail Ilyin's 20, who are in the top 75 in KHL scoring. So, Mikhail Ilyin's at 27th in KHL scoring, and he's playing on that top line for Severstal. And, he's doing pretty good work over there. If you've seen some of the clips, just some of the plays he's making are things you don't even think of. His creativity, his craftiness is on display. He's got great playmaking smarts. We've seen him score a couple nasty goals so far this season too. But this is a guy who I think the Penguins organization is high on. And, it's not like he was drafted in the early rounds. He was a Hextall draft pick back in the day, just FYI. Not every single thing Ron Hextall touched, went to crap. So Ilyin was one of those good ones. But, you look back on, you look at this Penguins prospect pool, and you start to pull out some guys who might have some higher ceiling potential. And he's starting to kind of separate himself as one of those guys. I think I'd say he's probably still kind of a wild card. But, he's doing a lot of good things over there. And he's playing such a mature game for somebody his age in the Continental Hockey League. And that's not something you don't see his production and just his smarts and just the kinds of things he can do at his age over there. So good stuff from him so far, but I'm kind of excited to see how the rest of the season unfolds for him and if he does come to North America next season, Hunter.
I do think he'll probably come to North America next year, and he'll be in the system in some way, shape, or form, whether it's Wheeling or Wilkes-Barre. Even last year, he was basically just about a half a point per game in the KHL, 30 points in 64 games. He's only 6 points away from tying his 30 points from last year. And I'll be the first to admit, when it comes to prospects in the system, he's probably the prospect I've watched the least. So I don't want to, fully comment on someone that I just haven't watched. That doesn't do anyone anything. I will say, though, at least from development camp from this summer, he made plays that made some of the other players there look really foolish. Like, it was like highlight reel type stuff. And look, people, it's glorified practice. There's a couple scrimmages in there, but it was at least a couple plays that made me perk my eyebrows up a little bit. So I'm glad that he is playing well over there, Kelsey. Nice job taking up some of those numbers. Curious to see how he does finish the season. And if I can get a hold of some tape, I will. It's just sometimes it's hard to find some KHL footage just because of the way it is. I think it's easier to find, footage of, prospects like Will Horkov, of course, Ryan Miller, Cale Dock, for example, who are also having great seasons. But that was a really good spotlight. And I do think he is going to eventually come over for next season.
Yeah, I hope so. And also, I wanted to correct myself. My math is terrible. He wasn't a Ron Hextall pick. He was actually in the 2023 draft. I just had a brain fart moment there. So just correcting myself from earlier. Yeah. So you can still ensue with your hatred of Ron Hextall if you so choose. Still a couple good things from him. Sergei Murashov was drafted by Ron Hextall. I can't let that one slip. But in terms of Ilyin, never mind. So just wanted to correct myself there.
Hey, Kelsey, he traded for Ricard Raquel as well, so I will give him props for that. Also a very good move.
True. And you know what? At the time, the Jeff Carter trade was a good trade too. I'm not so sure about the extension, but the trade was a good trade because Jeff Carter was playing like out of his mind after he came to the Penguins in that first stint there at the end of the season. But we're not here to crap on Ron Hextall on this
No.
podcast. That can be for a later time. But anyway, so yeah, just keep an eye on Mikhail Ilyin. I'm with Hunter. I've seen limited film. We always refer Jesse Marshall. Jesse Marshall's great at what he does. He probably has a pretty good mixtape of Mikhail Ilyin. I'm sure they'll be cooking up some footage here soon. But yeah, just if you get the chance, watch some of the film. He's doing some crazy things with the puck, and he is an exciting player to kind of keep an eye on. So Kyle Ilyin's our prospect spotlight this week. And with that, let's move into trending up, trending down, Hunter.
My turn.
Our weekly segment. Yeah, it is your turn to go first this week.
So I'm going to start with the trending down, and that is Archer Shilov's Kelsey. It just has not been good for him since coming back from Sweden. He has given up 8 goals on his last 19 shots. And you could tell right away in Toronto, or not in Toronto, but against Toronto, I should say, in Pittsburgh, he did not have it. He was flopping around like a fish in his crease. The movement was not there. He looked nervous, second-guessing himself. When they made it 2-1, they probably should have pulled him. And then Kelsey, because I'm pretty sure Kelsey, he got pulled after the 4th goal, if my memory serves me right, that made it 4-1. And by that point, it was too late. The game was out of reach. You could tell. It's funny. My co-host on Locked On Penguins, Pat and I were texting about this, and we were talking about how you could kind of tell some of the players are like, well, Shilovs doesn't really have it tonight. We're not really sure if we're going to be able to mount a comeback here, and kind of mailed it in a little bit. I loved the start that they had. First 7 to 10 minutes, they were taking it to the Maple Leafs, but then, once Shilovs, he gave up that first goal, and it was like, wasn't really that good of a goal. Kindle ties it. It's like, okay, you got the Penguins back in the game. And then that second goal they give up just a few minutes later, it was just like, all right, probably should have pulled him at that point. Back-to-back games of a save percentage of .600. Yes, that is correct. He's been real bad. And I'm not ready to say that this is a full-on trend yet, because these are by far his 2 worst starts of the year. And I felt like before that, he was playing really well. But he needs to find his game again. Or at some point down the line, Kelsey, he might get replaced by Murashov, Blomqvist. And that's just, I'm talking this season. We all know the future is hopefully looking bright for Murashov to be the guy for the organization. And I've said on the show a lot that I want him to get a full season in Wilkes-Barre for his development. But God forbid Shilovs keeps this up and he keeps stringing together bad performances. You might see him up here again this season, or maybe they call Yoel Blomqvist now that he's back healthy. So not ready to say for sure that he's bad or anything like that, just because the good has far outweighed the bad this year. But he needs to get it together, and he needs to get his confidence back. He has not had a good week.
Yeah, this was definitely a rough week for Shilovs. And, I think we've seen some of the things that people were maybe knocking on him for before he came to Pittsburgh a little bit over the last couple weeks, or over this last week, rather. On those long distance shots, he just looked uncomfortable, especially against Toronto. You saw him kind of misplay a couple of those, couple of misreads. He was out of position on a couple goals. A little bit deep in his net, not really challenging shooters too much. So yeah, you hope he gets his confidence back. I mean, I saw people all over Twitter.com after the game saying that they just need to, fire him into the sun. I wouldn't go there yet. This is 2 bad games in a row. This isn't a pattern quite yet. But I'd say if it does get to that 3-game mark where he's really struggling, you already kind of see things starting to shift with Tristan Jarry and him. Tristan Jarry earned 2 straight starts last week, which kind of says a lot. That was right off of an IR stint too, because Jarry played Wednesday and then he went right back in for Friday's game. And that was also a matchup thing. What'd you say?
And he's starting tonight. Yeah,
he's starting tonight again. And that was also a matchup thing too, because Tristan Jarry's career numbers against the Columbus Blue Jackets were way better than his career numbers against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I think it was a combination of things there. But, up until Jarry was injured initially, we saw that split between the two of them. And I think these next couple weeks will say a lot about who they have confidence in, who's kind of the guy for them right now. And right now, I mean, Tristan Jarry is kind of asserting himself as the guy. So Shilovs needs to really get his confidence back, in pretty quick order too, because you mentioned Sergei Burashov. He was sent down when Jari was activated. He goes right back to doing what he does at the AHL level against the Lehigh Valley Phantoms on Friday. Murashov stops 31 of 32, 969 save percentage, no big deal. First game back, it's fine. He only has a 934 save percentage in the AHL this year. No biggie. And then you have Joel Blomqvist, who, in his first 3 starts, he was really, really good in his first 3 starts. He had a little bit of a rough outing against Hershey on Saturday. He was pulled after 4 goals on 16 shots. But before that, he was doing pretty well for himself. So there's guys knocking at the door. And I think if the Penguins have made anything clear this year, I don't think that goaltending position is a safe position by any means. I think they're kind of inclined to play the best guys at that position. And Shelov's kind of has a little bit of a target on his back here. So we'll see how he responds in these next couple weeks. You presume he'll probably get a start at some point this week. But I kind of liked how you started with the trending Dan, because that allows us to kind of end on a more positive note as we transition into the last segment. So I will also start with my trending Dan. We'll go negative, then positive. And my trending Dan this week is Anthony Mantha. I do think it was a pretty decent couple weeks for Mantha. Prior to about 8 games ago, but he doesn't have any goals in the last 7 games. He only has 2 points in his last 8 games. So, I think this is reaching a point that this lineup's depleted. We've talked about it, as a little side note too, the Penguins in the month of November, we've talked about how much they struggled. Coincidentally, they didn't have Justin Brazeau for all of November, and he was injured right before November. And he was a really big part of that second line. And I think what you're seeing right now with Anthony Mantha, I generally like his chemistry with Evgeny Malkin. I think they've done pretty well for themselves this season. He's still on pace to shatter his career highs in points and goals. So, this is by no means a knock on his production for the most part this season. But, in this last stretch of games, he's one of those guys that you feel like he has to kind of produce to be effective. And unfortunately, he's just not getting the production right now. I think it really does help that line to have all 3 guys, Brazeau, Malkin, and Mantha, with their size, just with that size that can overwhelm opponents and in the offensive zone really helps them. And Mantha, I had a conversation with him last week. He kind of talked about that. He just said, a lot of people talk about the size of their line, but the reason it works so well is that they're just able to gain positioning at the net front. And the reason that works is because Gino cycles the zone. He kind of plays a little bit more east-west, whereas Mantha and Brazeau just go to the net and wait for their opportunity for Gino to do his thing. So I think not having Brazeau on that left side is kind of almost second-handedly affecting Mantha a little bit. And we've mentioned it. Hopefully they get healthy soon. Tommy Novak has been slotting in there for the most part. Just not the same type of dynamic that Brazeau has with the other 2. So just basically he's trending down in my book just because the production isn't there. No points in his last 5 games at all. So I think he just needs to pick up the production a little bit, especially in the absence of, these bigger guys like Rakell and Brazeau in their lineup.
I do think that's fair, and I think you're going to see the production go up a little bit more once you see Brazeau come back in the next week or so. Just felt like when he really was producing, it was just when that line was clicking. But I think that's a totally valid choice. My trending up, Sidney Crosby for this past week, 4 points in those 2 games. Ho-hum once again gets the 2 goals against Columbus, where, again, Kelsey goes down to one knee 10 out of 10 times. That's a goal. And then the second one, Jet Greaves totally misplayed it, and Sid said, "Hey, thank you very much, young sir. I will take that puck and I will fire it right past you." I thought Greaves easily should have come out there and played it, but he took advantage of a young goaltender's mistake and tied the game in the third period. And he was a menace, especially in the third period. And then, gets a goal and an assist against Toronto. I know they got blown out in that game, but, Sid continues to be on a 50-plus goal pace for the season, which is absolutely nuts. 16 goals and 27 points. Kelsey, we are getting really close to the next milestone. 9 points away now from tying Mario Lemieux for the franchise record in points for regular season. It's going to happen this month. So once they get back from this road trip, if you haven't gotten tickets to some of those home games later this month, I encourage you to do so, because I think you will see some history there, and it's going to be pretty awesome when he passes Mario and is the all-time franchise leader in points for the regular season, a record that, everyone said that was never going to be broken when Mario said it. And we're probably going to say that again now for Sid until maybe someone else comes along and does it. But it's going to be a really hard record to break, especially with the way that Sid has played throughout his career. And he still has plenty of more points to go for his career. So that is my trending up. If I had to do an honorable mention, I would say Tommy Novak. I thought he was real good last week. And Kelsey, I wrote about this for the Hockey News. I wrote about 3 players that I wanted to see more from with the Penguins. One of them was Novak, just because he came into the week not playing as well, second-guessing himself. The puck was kind of going off his stick too often. This past week, I think he shut me up because I wrote the article, and I think he shut a lot of people up in the fan base with his play. That give and go with Chris Letang was beautiful, but he was a menace in all 3 zones against Columbus. I thought he was arguably the Penguins' best player on the ice. Even against Buffalo, I felt like he played really well. Toronto, that was just a stinker, but I really liked his game this past week. And, you're seeing some of that chemistry with the big players, and he's going to be on the second line again tonight. So if I had to pick another player as an honorable mention, I would say Tommy Novak.
I like that pick, and I really liked his game against Columbus too. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that give and go with Chris Letang in overtime was something to see. But so was that pass to Sidney Crosby on Sidney Crosby's goal, where he scared Jet Greaves out of his boots. But it's just, you saw that pass, and honestly, I think it's debatable whether or not that was intentional on Novak's part. But, he banks it off the boards there. Sid recognizes that, which was impressive in itself, by the way. The fact that Sid was able to recognize that and then just make the play, he caught up to that puck. He saw that Greaves was kind of shaking in his boots, watching Sidney Crosby come in all alone against him. So he kind of took advantage of that. But Novak's pass there was really instinctual, and we saw him get rid of that puck pretty quickly too. And he banked that pass. I would argue that it kind of was supposed to be intentional, just with the angle that it was going and just the trajectory of the pass. But I guess that's something I'll have to ask him about. But I really like Novak's game against Columbus. I agree with you. He was a menace in that game. And it's nice to see his game trending up, because we've talked about it. He's one of those periphery players that if he's not performing and he's not producing and he's not doing things to help the team win, he's somebody that can be substituted for one of those younger guys like a McGroarty, like Kindle, like Koivunen, and just any of those guys. Those guys are probably going to get a look if he's not performing. So it's nice to see the results coming to the forefront for Tommy Novak, because I think he's put together a nice string of games too. And I think he's been one of the best players for the Penguins over this last week or so. I've really liked his game. Obviously, I love your pick about Sid. For real, guys, get to PPG Paints Arena in December. This could literally happen at any second. Sid could put up 6 points in the next 2 games, and then all of a sudden you're going to be buying tickets to every home game until he does it. So, but honestly, it's just crazy to think that Mario Lemieux's record is even being broken at this point. We could go on and on about Sid, and we could have an entire podcast episode about it, but just remarkable stuff from the captain. He's definitely trending up. And I'm going to take your route here. I'm going to do like a kind of 1A and then a 1B, kind of an honorable mention situation, a little bit of a 2 for this week. I do want to start with my first trending up player, which is Brian Rust. I want to give him a lot of credit for the way that he played this past week, because he's been in my trending down twice this season. I've been a little bit harsh on him. You mentioned it. We haven't loved his process this season. His play away from the puck. At times, he just hasn't been productive either. But I'll tell you what, that game against Columbus, that is the stuff that Brian Rust is on this team for. Because the Penguins were kind of, I don't want to say down and out, they were kind of down and out after 40 minutes, and it wasn't looking good, especially when they gave up that late goal in the second period. There was 3 seconds left on the clock. Werenski snipes that. It's looking like one of those games that they're just not going to recover from. Brian Rust says, comes out 13 seconds into the third period and snipes one of his own past Greaves. And you mentioned it, in the second period, he left the ice twice due to apparent injuries. We didn't know if he was going to return in the game at all because the second time it was towards the end of the period, it didn't come back out. And then he comes back out and scores a goal 13 seconds in. So, that goal changed the entire complexion of that game. It changed the momentum. It shifted everything for the Penguins. I thought he was really solid the rest of the night. I also liked his game for the most part against Buffalo. He does have 3 points in the last 3 games, 2 goals and 3 points in the last 3 games. A lot of people kind of, I think, underscore Brian Rust's value to this team. It kind of just almost lump him in with this, throwaway trade status where they can just maximize the return for him and get a first, whatever you're going to get in return for him. But I think there's a lot of value in having a guy like Brian Rust around this roster and around these younger players, because something to consider, and we talked about this earlier on in this season and over the summer too. Brian Rust is one of those guys that brings so many intangibles, and I think so much of that was on display against Columbus. He kind of started out in this position. He wasn't a Sidney Crosby coming into the league. He wasn't a Chris Letang. He wasn't a Evgeny Malkin. He wasn't some guy coming into the league that, you expected to be a top 6 talent. You expected to be a high-end guy. He came in as a fourth liner, as a grinder, and he worked his way up into a top 6 role. There's not anybody that you're going to see work harder than Brian Rust, maybe Sidney Crosby, but that's where he gets it from. Brian Rust has earned everything he's gotten at the National Hockey League level, and he's earned his way into being in the conversation for Team USA for the Olympic roster, being in the conversation of being, a top line winger. And a lot of contenders would probably love to have a guy like him in the roster, but there's a lot of value to having a guy like him around these young guys because he knows the value of working your way up in an NHL lineup and just earning that. So Brian Rust trending up. I really liked the week from him, and that game in Columbus kind of reminded us why Brian Rust is important to this team and what he can provide to the lineup. My honorable mention is Ville Koivunen. I mentioned it earlier. Folks, I know he's not scoring. I know he hasn't been producing, but I really like what I'm seeing from the process the last couple games. I thought he was one of the few players against the Toronto Maple Leafs that actually looked pretty good in that game. I thought him and Kindle were displaying a pretty good degree of chemistry, and they have been for most of the season that they've been playing together. And he's getting chances, man. We've talked about it. He's so close to scoring that goal. And I feel like once that does happen, I don't want to say the floodgates are going to open. Things are unpredictable with young players, but it just really does seem like he needs to just get over that hump. And once he does get that goal, I think the production will start to come a little bit easier to him because he's gripping his stick a little bit too tight right now. He's trying a little bit too hard to get that first one. So I think once that happens, it'll probably be some stupid, dirty goal where it hits off of 5 things and goes in that. But sometimes that's kind of the kind of goal you need to get off the hump like that. So I'm excited to see, what kind of chemistry he can display with McGroarty, how him and Kindle and McGroarty all work together. I think that could be a really formidable line for the Penguins if it all meshes together, as we think it could mesh together. So I pick him for trending up because I really, really think it's coming. And anybody who's saying that he's a career AHLer at this point, 21 games into his NHL career, after 7 points in 8 games to start his NHL career, I think that's a little bit of a reach right now. So let's give Ville Koivunen a little bit more runway and see how he looks with McGroarty and Ben Kindle.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think some of the talk about Koivu is a little premature. I still want to see a little bit more of a sample size before I would make a statement like that. But that's also just me, in my opinion. I agree with basically everything you said about Rust outside of the Team USA thing, Kelsey. I don't think he is on the Team USA radar, at least for right now. Just with the players that they have. I know Billy Guerin has said his things about, well, if you can't check, you're not going to be on this team, even though I don't think he understands that the WIHF, like, they officiate games differently overseas than they do in the NHL. So it's Billy Guerin. I don't think I'm prepared for Team USA to make dumb decisions, but I don't think
Well,
he is going to be on the roster. Again, I agree
no,
that
no, I wasn't like, just to clarify, I wasn't saying he was going to be on the roster. I was saying he was in the mix because he was invited to the camp this
yeah,
summer. So, like, legitimately, he was in the mix and like is
yeah,
in the mix. Whether he gets the roster spot, I think that is a little bit of a reach. I would agree with you.
yeah. I think right now there's just too many other better players than him that are
Yeah,
playing in the league right now that are more deserving than him,
yeah.
in my opinion. But everything else, I completely agree with you on. But I guess let's end the show with everyone's favorite topic, Kelsey, and that is Tristan Jarry trade rumors, because those were put into high gear last week by Kevin Weeks, who likes to, I guess, engagement farm on Twitter, but also not really rage bait, but engagement farm is definitely something that he likes to do. Who put like the city of an NHL team with the eye emoji and stuff like that. This one was a full tweet though. He actually talked about, Tristan Jarry being available out there and stuff. And you've seen Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts also discuss that Pittsburgh does have goalies available. He's talked about the four, Murashov, and we all know he's not going anywhere. Shilovs, and I don't think right now he is going anywhere. Talked about Blomqvist, and he talked about Tristan Jarry. And we all know the team that comes to mind right away is the Edmonton Oilers, because for some reason they wanted to bring back Stuart Skinner and Cal Pickard. I know that they are cheap, but they are just not good goaltenders. With Edmonton, they would have to be creative to make this work, because, Kelsey, have you looked at their salary cap situation? It's not pretty. They would need to open up cap, and they would have to send some salary back to the Penguins to make this work. I've had a couple conversations with some fans about this. A couple of people were like, "Oh, I wouldn't mind if I wouldn't care, excuse me, if Darnell Nurse came back." I think I'm good. I don't need Darnell Nurse's contract on this team. I don't care that the team is not trying to win right now. That is too much money for too much term, and he is on the downward trend of his career. Just because you can spend money and take back money doesn't mean you just take back a bad contract. That's a non-starter for me. I've seen people bring up Stuart Skinner, and that one is at least a bit more feasible, Kelsey, for the only reason because he is a UFA at the end of the year. So he would just walk to a different team. The Penguins, there would really be no reason to give him a contract, just with Murashov and, Shilovs potentially getting another deal and so on and so forth. But, once you get outside of those couple of players who I've seen thrown around, the Oilers, you look at their prospect system, Kelsey, not the prettiest. I don't think they're going to trade Isaac Howard. I don't think they're going to trade Savoy. It starts getting dicey there pretty quick. So obviously that's a team that everyone's talking about, but maybe there's another team or two that come into the mix at some point. But if Jarry keeps this up, I think you will see potentially multiple suitors come calling for him. The better he plays, the better for the Penguins, people.
Yeah, and that's kind of point blank period there. And it is a kind of an interesting situation, I think, that the Penguins find themselves in because, as of up to this point in the season, I mean, we saw a really good sample size from Murashov. There were a couple rookie moments, a couple goals you want back from him. That overtime goal comes to mind. But, aside from that, Murashov has been pretty darn good. But Tristan Jarry, you got to give him credit for the way he's asserted himself this season and reasserted himself. I mean, to say it was a rough season for him last year is a vast understatement. I mean, he was waived last season. He was basically like on life support last season with the Pittsburgh Penguins organization. And then he comes back in and he's putting together a really solid campaign. And I mean, we've seen this from Jarry too. I mean, this is nothing new. Like Jarry, we know Jarry's capable of this level. He's a two-time All-Star, and that's not an accident. I mean, he's had, legitimately good runs with the Penguins. The issue in the past has been that second half, and just sustaining that play through the season. So the Penguins are in an interesting spot here because they are competing for a playoff spot. Whether or not that was the plan, that's where they are. So, I mean, this is going to be kind of an interesting situation to monitor, because if the Penguins continue to push for the playoffs, you can presume that Jari's probably going to be a pretty big reason why. But at the same time, if you would have said a year ago that Tristan Jarry would have been a trade chip, I don't think anybody would have thought that.
No.
Now, all of a sudden, you're looking at a couple more years on his contract. He's paid over $5 million per season. If you can get out from under that contract and you have the goaltending depth that the Penguins have, that might be something that, regardless of playoff positioning, you might want to capitalize on, especially if teams are willing to pay up for Tristan Jarry. So this will be an interesting situation to monitor regardless of what happens, but especially if the Penguins are still in that playoff hunt. I think if they fall off, you never know. That could be a big part. Jarry could play a big part in that too, because we don't know if this goaltending is going to sustain itself. But you almost have to consider capitalizing on that if it's a possibility. So then the other end of that, do you want to rely on a couple young goaltenders to push you to the playoffs? It's a conundrum. It really is. And it'll be interesting to follow this, but I do agree Edmonton's going to have to do some real cap gymnastics to make this work. I understand that this is a really big need for them, because I'm just going to say it, Stuart Skinner's just not it.
No.
I don't think Edmonton's going to win anything with him as their primary goaltender. 885 save percentage this year, obviously well below his career save percentage of 904. But the past couple seasons, he's just not been able to put it together. The reason that Edmonton's made it so far in the playoffs is primarily because of their two best players. He's had his moments in the playoffs, but they've got to get there first. And right now, they're on the outside looking in. So they need to address this in whatever way they can. Jordan Binnington's getting a lot of talk to because of the season St. Louis is having. So we'll just kind of see what happens with the situation. But you're right. Kevin Weeks does like to stir the pot a little bit with those cryptic tweets. But, this time it wasn't all that cryptic. He just went out and said it. So, and the fact that there are multiple, insiders kind of saying similar things, there might be some traction to this, but we'll just have to see. So be interesting to follow. But as we mentioned, Penguins play Philadelphia tonight, so tune in for that. They also play Tampa later this week on Thursday. Tampa's been on a tear since starting slow. They're a really, really good hockey team right now, a really dangerous team. And then they go onward to Dallas Sunday before coming home against Anaheim next week on the 9th. So make plans to come into town, watch the Penguins, and see Sidney Crosby make history. But that's going to do it for us today. Thanks for tuning in as usual. Just a reminder, you can follow both mine and Hunter's work on the Hockey News Penguins website. We'll be putting out a lot of good content this month, especially with such a condensed schedule. There will just be a lot to talk about. Guys returning from injury, we've kind of already discussed that. So follow along on the Hockey News Penguins website. You can follow Pucksnat at Pucksnat pod _ on Twitter, no underscores everywhere else. Subscribe if you haven't, and follow us both on Twitter as well. And you can also find Hunter on Locked On daily. So yeah, for Hunter Hodies, I'm Kelsey Surmacz. Stay out of trouble in that.